Welcome back to educator.com. For the next lesson, we're going to be finding percents of a number. So when we're finding a percent of a number, that means we're finding a portion of a number, right? Some part of a number. Now, whenever we have a percent of a number, let's translate the sentence into an equation. Of means times. Whenever you see the word of in the sentence, it means times. Okay, so of like this is times. When you see the word what means the unknown, right? What is what we're looking for? So that's going to be the variable. Okay, what is the variable? And then whenever you see the word is means equal. So whenever you see the word is, you're going to write that symbol. Okay? So whenever you're finding a percent of a number, you're always going to be multiplying the percent with the number because of this times, right? Here, what is a variable? X. Okay, you can use whatever variable you like. So you can use A, you can use B, you can use Z, doesn't matter. X is. Is means equals 30%. Now 30%, whenever we solve with percents, we have to change it to a decimal. Remember, we can't solve with a percent number. So remember to change percents into a decimal, you're going to start from the end of the number. Okay, if you don't see the decimal point, then it always belongs at the end of a number. And you're going to move 2 spaces to the left. And you know it's going to be to the left when you change it to decimal because decimals are small. So think of decimals as smaller than percents. So to change from a percent to a decimal, we're going to move the decimal point over to the left because that's going to make the number smaller. 2 spaces. So it's going to go 1, 2. That's the new space, or that's the new where the decimal point's going to go. So here it's going to be 0.30. So this is going to change to 0.30. Of always means times. Now, here, I want to show that I'm going to multiply this number to this number, right? Be careful because we don't want to use x for times anymore. Because here we have x as a variable. So instead of using x, use parentheses. Now you also probably know about the dot as times. Well, sometimes that's okay, but between 2 numbers, you don't want to use dot because that kind of looks like a decimal. Also, if you read it a little bit too low, it might look like a decimal. So whenever you're going to multiply 2 numbers together, it's always best to just use parentheses. Okay? And writing the number in parentheses like that between 2 numbers, it shows that you're going to be multiplying those 2. So what is 30% of 100? You know that you're going to be multiplying 0.30 with 100 to find the missing value x. So 100 times 0.30, okay, is going to be 0, and then 0, 0. I'm sorry. Okay, well, if you want to just multiply this 0 out, okay, you can do that, and then multiply this through under, so then put a 0 here, 3 times 0, 0, 3. 3, 0, 0, 0. Be careful when you have so many zeros. Now, within the problem, because we multiplied, how many numbers are behind the decimal point? There's 2 numbers, right? 1, 2. So we have 2 numbers behind decimal point. You're going to go to the answer starting at the end, okay? You're going to go 1, 2. And that's where the decimal point is going to go, 30. So x equals, all this was 30. Now there's a shortcut. Whenever you multiply a number, a decimal number, to a multiple of 10, so that's 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, right? Whenever you have a number multiplied to a number with 1 and then zeros, like 100, there's a shortcut way of doing this. You can count how many zeros there are in that number. So 100 has 2 zeros. Then you're going to move this decimal point 2 spaces. And you want to, since you're going to be multiplying, when you multiply, the number tends to get bigger, right? So you're going to go 2 spaces to the right, because moving the decimal point over to the right makes the number bigger. So you're going to go 1, 2, and then that's going to give you 30. And remember, if you don't see a decimal point, it's always at the end right there. Okay? If you were multiplying this number by 10, let's say you're multiplying it by 10. Well, 10 has only 1 zero, so you would only move the decimal point over once to the right. So that would be 3.0, which is the same thing as 3. Remember, if there's a 0 at the end of a number behind a decimal point, it's as if it's not there. So 3.0 is the same thing as 3. If you're multiplying by 1,000, well, 1,000 has 3 zeros, right? So then you'd have to move the decimal point over 3 spaces. And then remember, if you have an empty space, you have to fill it in with an extra 0. So that's a shortcut when multiplying by a number that's a multiple of 10. So 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. Okay, you just have to count the number of zeros and then move the decimal point over that many spaces. So what is 30% of 100? That's 30. 30 is 30% of 100. Okay? So we're just going to do a few more examples here. 50% of 18 is, so here, 50%, again, remember whenever we have to solve using percents, we have to change it to a decimal because you can't solve with a percent. So if you have a percent, then you need to change it to a decimal. So remember, percent to decimal. If we have a percent, 50%, you want to move the decimal point over 2 spaces between percent to decimal or decimal to percent. From percent to decimal, you start at the end right here, and you have to move 2 spaces to the left because remember, decimals are small numbers. So you want to turn this number into a smaller number. And to do that, you have to move the decimal point over to the left. If you move it to the right, then the number gets bigger, right? So move it to the side, that's going to make it smaller. So 2 spaces, it's going to be right here. 1, 2, drop the percent sign, becomes 0.50. Or because the 0 is at the end of a number behind the decimal point, it's as if it's not there. You don't even have to write it. So 0.50 is the same thing as 0.5. It's the same thing. Okay, so this is 0.50 or 0.5 of means times, remember if I'm going to multiply 2 numbers together, I want to write it in parentheses, times 18, okay, is equals the number, right, x, which is what we're solving for. So the reason why now, as long as you know that you have to multiply the percent with the number, okay, because of is between the 2 numbers. Again, 50% you change to decimal. So as long as you know that you have to multiply these 2, you don't have to write it into this equation, okay? Because all we're doing is finding percents of a number, of meaning times. So you just have to be able to multiply these 2 numbers together. The reason why I'm saying write an equation is because for the next lesson, we're going to have to solve for maybe this number or solve for the percent. Okay, and this number will be given to you. So in that case, when you're solving for another number, this is the easiest way for you to be able to write an equation and know what your variable is, what it is you're solving for, because a variable is always what you're solving for, right? Okay, so if you don't want to do it this way, then just make sure you remember to multiply. Just of means times, so you're going to be multiplying the number with the other number, okay? So 0.5 times 18, I'm going to write that here, 18 times 0.5, 8 times 5 is 40, 5 times 1, 5, plus 4 is 9. So within here, how many numbers are behind the decimal point? I only have 1. So starting right here, you're going to go inwards 1. So my answer is going to be 9.0 or 9. 9.0 and 9 is the same thing, right? Again, 0 is at the end of a number behind the decimal point, so you can just drop it. So 9. So 50% of 18 is 9. Now 50% means half. 50% means half. So what's half of 18? Half of 18 is 9, meaning if you were to split, if you have, let's say, 18 pieces of candy, and you had to split it in half, you can only take half of them. So you take half, and then your brother or sister has to take the other half. Well, then you would take 9, and your brother or sister would take the other 9. Okay? So 50% means half. So all you have to do is 50% of 18, you just figure out what half of 18 is. Okay? The next one. So here, 8% from percent to a decimal. Again, you're going to start right here. You're going to move 2 spaces to the left. You're going to go 1 and 2. So point. There's an empty space right here, so then you have to fill it with the 0, 0, 8. And then, again, you're going to drop the percent, right, because it's no longer percent. 0.08. 8% is 0.08. Of means times 6. So again, write it in parentheses when you're multiplying 2 numbers. And then is equals the number x or blank. So 0.08 times 6, 0.08 times 6, 8 times 6 is 48. This is just 0, right? So how many numbers do I have behind the decimal point? I only have 2. There's none right here. Decimal point's at the end right here. So I only have 2. So from the end, I'm going to go in 2 spaces, 1, 2, right there. So 8% of 6 is 0.48. Okay, and the next one, 99% of 100 is 99% changes to a decimal because you're solving with it, 99%. You're going to go 1, 2. It's going to be 0.99 of means times 100 in parentheses equals something. So 0.99 times 100. Okay, let's do our shortcut. Remember, if you want, you can multiply it out like this. Remember, whenever you multiply a number, that's a multiple of 10, meaning 10, 100. I'm sorry, not a multiple of 100, but if you have a power of 100, so 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. What that means is any number with a 1 with a bunch of zeros, right? So 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, and so on. Now, since I have 100, and 100 has 2 zeros, I'm going to take the decimal point, and I'm going to move it 2 spaces. But remember, I have to move it to the right 2 spaces because when you multiply by 100, that means your number has to get bigger. So to make this number bigger, I'm going to move it to the right. So 1, 2, that's where my decimal place is going to go. That's going to be 99.0, or remember, if it's at the end of a number, you can just drop it. You can make it invisible. Okay, so 99. So 99% of 100 is 99. Now, whenever you find a percent of 100, it's always just that number. Okay? If I have 1% of 100, that's going to be 1. If I have 2% of 100, that's going to be 2. If I have 100% of 100, that's going to be 100. So whenever you take a percent of 100, it's just going to be this number without the percent sign. So 68% of 100 is 68. And that's only if this number is 100. Okay? Okay, let's just do a few more. What is 25% of 60? So this is what we're solving for, right? I can make that into my variable. You can use a question mark. You can do a little blank. Is equals 25% to decimal. So I'm going to change 25%. Start right here at the end. You're going to go in 1, 2. It's going to be 0.25 of means times. And again, since you're multiplying two numbers together, you're going to write it in parentheses like that. So to solve this, I have to find the what, to find this, I have to multiply 0.25 with 60. So 60 times 0.25, this is 0, 6 times 5 is 30. Put a 0 here, 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 6 is 12. Add them together, 0, 0, 5, 1. How many numbers are behind decimal points? I only have 1, 2. So you're going to start here, you're going to go 1, 2. Remember, zeros are at the end of a number behind the decimal point, so this is just going to be 15. So x, this unknown, is 15. That means 15 is 25% of 60. What number is 10% of 10? So again, what number is the same thing as just what, right? Or blank or question mark. You're looking for the number. Is 10%, 1, 2, 0.10 of 10. Okay, I know that 10 times 10 is 100, and then you can just move the decimal point over that many times. Or we can just use our shortcut. Since I'm multiplying a decimal by 10, how many zeros do I have in 10? I only have 1 0. So I'm going to move this decimal point over 1 time. So it's going to be 1.0, but that's the same thing as 1, right? You can just drop this 0, and then if the decimal place is at the end of a number, then you can just make that invisible, right? So you can just write that as 1. That means 1 is 10% of 10. Okay? Find 5% of 40. So we want to find 5% of 40. 5%, even though this right here is the same thing as this, right? So we still have to change this. Be careful, just because you don't see the percent sign doesn't mean that you can just drop this number down. It's still a percent, so you have to change this to a decimal. So 5%. Again, start at the end. You're going to go 1, 2, maybe space right here. So 0, 5 of is times 40. So you're going to multiply these two numbers together. 0.05 times 40. 0 times 5 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. Put a 0 down there. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 0 is 0. Add the 2. Be 0, 0. Remember, we're adding them down. 200. How many numbers total are behind decimal points? I only have 2. These two. So I'm going to go from here. I'm going to go 1, 2, in 2 spaces. So my answer is 2.00, which is, remember, the same thing as just 2. So my answer is going to be 2. So 5% of 40 is 2. 100% of 18. 100% of 18, when I say 100%, I'm trying to say all of it. So when I say, this is like saying all of 18. 100% of 18 is all of 18. What's all of 18? All of 18, if you have 18 pieces of candy, what's all of it? How many would be considered all of it? 18, right? So 100% of 18 is just 18. Now, if you want to just solve it out, 100% into a decimal is going to be 1.0. Or, remember, this is the same thing as 1. So, even though you don't see a percent or a decimal here, numbers always have a decimal point. It's just if you don't see it, if it's invisible, it's always at the end, right? So 100% is the same thing as 1 in decimal. So it's like saying 1, or 1.0 if you want, times 18. What's 1 times 18? Isn't that 18? Okay, so again, shortcut, if you have 100%, you're saying what's all of it? So all of 18 is 18. 1% of 2,000. So into a decimal, start here, you're going to go 1, 2, the decimal point, D space, so you're going to fill it in with the 0 and 1. So 1% in decimal is 0.01. Be careful that you don't just make it 0.1 of times 2,000. Okay, so multiply it out. Times 0.01. This is 0, 0, 0, 2. And then this is just all zeros, right? So I don't have to write that in. It's like adding zeros. If I add zeros to this number, it's just going to be that same number. So from here, how many numbers are behind decimal points? 2. Start from here and you go 1, 2, decimal point. So my answer here is going to be 20.00. Again, if the zeros are behind the decimal point, at the end of a number, you can just drop them. So I could drop this. So it'll be 20 point, but then I can just drop that, make that decimal point invisible if it's at the end. So it'll just be 20. And the final example, a bag of candy contains 40 pieces. If Susanna ate 20% of the candy, or everything in the bag of candy, how many pieces did she eat? So a whole bag contains 40 pieces. She ate 20% of it. How many pieces did she eat? Okay, look at this. 20% of the candy. Okay, so what's the candy? How many pieces does the bag of candy contain? 40 pieces. So it's like saying she ate 20% of the 40 pieces, right? 20%, again, if I want to solve with this number, I have to change it to a decimal. So 20%, the decimal, I'm going to start here. Go 1, 2, is 0.20. Of is times, right? You're going to multiply what? The 40. Because she ate 20% of all the pieces. So times 40. So then here, this is going to be, remember, if the 0 is at the end of a number and it's behind the decimal point, I can just drop it. So this is the same thing as 0.2 times 40. I can't drop this 0. Be careful here. Don't drop the 0 because this 0 is not behind a decimal point, right? Decimal point is right here, right there. So, since it's not behind a decimal point, I can't drop the 0. But this one I can, right? That'll just make it easier to multiply. 40 times 0.2, okay, is going to be 80. I only have one number behind the decimal point. Start here, you're going to go in one space. So 0.2 times 40 is going to be 8. Now, good thing with word problems is that you can kind of estimate if your answer sounds correct. So let's say I forget to count how many numbers I have behind decimal points and I just leave it as 80. Well, 80 can't be my answer because if the bag of candy contains only 40 pieces, Susanna ate 20% of it. Would it make sense if my answer was 80, that she ate 80 pieces? There's only 40 pieces, right? So this, I know this answer sounds correct, right? It seems correct. It seems reasonable. Okay, remember 50% is half, right? 100%, if Susanna ate 100% of the candy, that means she would have eaten all of the candy, so then my answer would just be 40. If Susanna ate 50% of the candy, remember 50% is half of the number, so if this said 50%, then you would have to just find half of 40. So she would have eaten 20 pieces of candy, right? So she only ate 20%, that means she has to have eaten less than half. If 20 is half, well, we know 8 is reasonable then, right? Because it has to be less than half. Okay? Okay, well, that is it for this lesson. Thank you for watching educator.com.